We're backstage with the one and only Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, and this is indeed an honor for me, Robert. It's so nice to finally meet you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you kneeling at the foot of my bed.
Oh, if I could just stay here forever, but let's get on to... We get into this line, and we'll never finish talking about it. One of the things that I thought about, I know that you and Bonham, John Bonham, whom you call Bonzo, were friends as children. What kind of kids were you?
Well, we're still children. When we were children of the first degree, we first made contact when we were about 15 years old, playing around the same town. I considered myself to be outrageous enough to try and develop what might have been considered to be possibly an avant-garde form of popular music, which I tried to put across to the public. In England, the public were very stereotyped into... They had no choice but to listen to one radio station, which is the British Broadcasting Bullshit Corporation, right? Which really limits the material that the kids over there or the people over there are going to be able to hear, you know? I picked up a lot of sounds from dingy record stores that used to import some really good music from this very country, and I found that there was far more to the music that I was able to pick up from these little joints than there was being played on the radio. You know, I picked up on the New Orleans rock of Ernie K. Doe and Benny Spellman, Aaron Neville and people like that. At the same time, I wasn't alone, but in the part of the country where I lived, I probably was one of the few people who were into the early chess recordings of Howlin' Wolf and Little Milton and people like that, you know. And I tried my hardest to put it across for $30 a night to an audience who weren't ready for it. The outcome was pretty good considering we were English, you know, and we had a good little band, but the people were the people in the band were a little mundane. They weren't really as much into it as I was. They followed me because I was a front man, you know.
Now what band are you talking about now? This was
This goes back to the Crawling King Snakes.
Which was your first?
Well, it was the first time that I started wiggling my arse. Before that, it was just sitting on a chair playing a washboard and blowing a harmonica, you know.
Did you have any formal training, Robert?
No, I just like to turn people on, and I like to see people get turned on visibly, you know. And I found that the music that I was able to pick up on, which wasn't the popular cliched music at the time, was music that I could express myself in far more, you know. And there was a man who stood in the audience and said to me, listen, you're pretty good, but you really need a good drummer, and I'm the best drummer in the world.
That was Bonzo, right?
Yeah, and he's right too.
We all know that by now.
And that was 11 years ago, yeah.
What happened after Crawling? Let me see. Crawling King Snakes was just you, or was Bonzo there with you?
Yeah. He joined.
And then what happened?
I went through various changes, always taking an amount of blues, an amount of the New Orleans, Chicago type of music with me, you know, for a couple of 3 years, just wandering around England, but getting very little response. In fact, working very seldom, maybe twice a week, you know. Promoters telling me, well, listen, you've got a great presence on stage, but why don't you do songs by Cliff Richard or Elvis or somebody like that? And I said, well, look, the only reason that I've got any presence at all is because I'm taking something that is virtually unknown, adding myself to it, and the answer to the equation is what you see, you know. I'm not going to be following everybody else ever. So the work was very few and far between, and good times and bad times, where it was just
Good song title.
Yeah, and we're just like, no, it was touch and go, you know. So Bonzo left and went his way, and he played with guys who were doing more work than me, and I just kept on starving.
It didn't look like it left any permanent damage.
No, just a twinkle in my eye.
I noticed that. What happened now? You finally got back together with Bonzo and with John and Jimmy. How did that all come about? Where in your career did that happen?
Oh, well, I had a band called Robert Plant and the Band of Joy, which involved Bonzo. Once again came up to me and said, "Listen, you've got a great band, but what you need is a drum." I said, "Well, I heard that a few years ago, you know." And he came and joined me, and at the time it would be about 1966, 67, and I had suddenly thrown away the Ernie Cado, the New Orleans sort of thing, and I'd taken to wearing beads around my neck and listening to Moby Grape and Forever Changes by Arthur Lee and all that sort of thing, and I had suddenly come to the conclusion that through music we could, all of us, come to better days, you know. It could be a method of, or a means of communicating positivity, you know. And in England that was just a dream, really, because people were still being brainwashed by a really shallow, bodiless musical form, you know. So the Band of Joy went on the road, and although we received quite an amount of acclaim, it was truly, if I dare use the term, underground. It was like, we'd work occasionally. We worked at the Middle Earth and centres of the new musical impetus, you know. There were very few places around England that would have us. But anyway, we carried on working, and although we did become quite a name underneath everything, you know. There was no bread again, and Bonzo said, "Oh no, you know, I can't keep on playing for no bread." So he started working with a guy called Tim Rose, an American guy who did Morning Dew and who was very good, you know. And Bonzo got a bit of a name in England for doing that. And I folded the Band of Joy and started working with a guy called Alexis Corner, who's like the daddy of the blues in England.
I was going to say granddaddy, but you were kind of...
Well, daddy, yeah. Who is a statesman, if you like to call it that, a statesman a diplomat of blues. And I worked a lot in folk clubs and things. It wasn't really my trip to stand there tapping one foot and playing a harmonica, you know. But it was a means to an end, really, because it kept me in the field of music that I liked, you know. During the days of the Band of Joy, when we were able to play, I met a guy called Terry Reid, who just by chance one night lent me his equipment to sing through, you know. And I never saw him again until I received a telegram from one Peter Grant saying, "Terry Reid says you're the best singer in England. Come and try and sing with the Yardbirds." And I thought somebody was, you know, getting me at it, so I ignored the telegram and until the next telegram came, and I said, "Okay, come up and let's have a chat." And I was playing with the band. We were doing all Moby Grape stuff and everything, you know. And he and Peter and Jimmy Page wandered into this empty college where we were playing, and stood back at a distance and went, "He's okay." Which left us really to see whether we'd get on, and I ended up at Page's house listening. We just spent a few days listening to sounds, seeing exactly whether in fact we were very closely akin musically, and we found that we were almost joined almost as one in our taste, you know.
That's how Led Zeppelin was born. The fact that you were so close in thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I said to him was, he said, "Well, what do you like?" And I said, "Well, I like everything that's good." And he had a Joan Baez album lying about. And I said, "There's one track on here that's a traditional song that I've always wanted to do something with." And he said, "Well, that's funny. There's a track on one of her albums that I really dig too, you know." and it was "Babe, I'm going to leave you," and we both said, "Babe, I'm going to leave you," and we looked at each other and went, all we need now is a bass player and a drummer.
You know just where to go to get him, right?
Well, there were a few drummers, but once again, it was...
That's where to go to get him, right?
Well, there were a few drummers, but once again, it was my turn to say to Bonham this time, "Listen, I've got a great band. You're the drummer, you know." And he said, "Oh, no, not again." He said, "No, I'm fed up of being broke."
How did you pick the name Led Zeppelin?
Well, that was Keith Moon's trip. It's, I believe you got a term over here, lead balloon, which means, you know, a lot of hot air, but it doesn't go anywhere, you know.
It means a bomb, really. I mean, you went over like a lead balloon.
Right, a nowhere thing. So it's a good way to start.
In other words, that with the name like that, anything that you did better would be a real surprise?
Right, yeah. As in Swan Song, which is like the last cry. The swan never makes a noise, never makes a sound until it dies.
It sings its final song as it soars into heaven, as the legend goes.
So we thought we'll start the label at the end.
Fantastic. When you started with Led Zeppelin, of course, that first album, did you in those days have any idea or feeling about becoming the supergroup that you are?
No, I really... My limits of perception were far removed from how they are now. I couldn't even envisage America, let alone stardom, you know. When I got off the plane in LA and saw a cop with a gun, I mean, there were so many things that I had to see and feel and touch, let alone mass acceptance.
Now that...
And also, I mean, not only mass acceptance, but the way that we've been accepted. We aren't accepted for a physical trip, particularly, or a violent trip, or whatever you like. It's a very, very communicative rapport that we've developed, you know, which really, I mean, you can be popular, but popularity is okay. But if you take it to its extreme limits, and you develop a rapport such as the one that we have now got with people, where we're more or less sitting on their laps, you know? It's that close.
What's your explanation of it? I mean, why do you think that you've been able to develop something that I'll go so far as to say no other band has? Because I don't know of any other group that could sell out 100,000 tickets in 3 hours, and according to your last tour, you broke records set by the Beatles. I mean, what is that little extra something, Robert? I mean, do you have any ideas about it?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask the 100,000 people, but in my eyes, when I walk out there, there's not an ounce of pretense comes from anybody on the stage. It's total. I mean, we're laughing and giggling in serious parts because somebody might have blown half a note somewhere or something like that. And as much as we're capable of producing so much atmosphere and so much sort of one moment tension and one moment elation, you know, the audience or the people or the extension of ourselves they all are aware of the fact that there's not a single time that we are kidding them, that we're putting anything over that isn't 100% ourselves, you know. Whereas I've been to see bands where it's very, very, here's the show, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then goodbye, you know.
I think a lot of it, I think, maybe has to do with the fact that you genuinely have an affection for each other. Do you think that enters into it?
Oh, naturally, we wouldn't be able to play together after this length of time if we didn't feel strongly for each other, you know. There's a corny word that's used a lot called chemistry. A lot of people use it. It's used in articles, and a lot of people always say it, but this is very true, you know. That we possess when we walk out onto that stage, an affinity, the four of us, one to each other, that I don't see very often anywhere else.
Nor do the rest of us. In your opinion, looking back now over all the albums that you've done, and the single that never appeared in an album, what would you say is the thing that you're most proud of in your career?
It's just below my belt. Hang on a tick. Let me think. I don't know, just the ability to make people smile, you know? Just to see people truly, truly happy and elated, you know?
What do you want most in all the world now?
Oh, I'd never really thought about that. Just to make people smile even wider. To make the smile go from ear to ear. I don't know. You see, it's like communion, really, you know? It's like the sexual act. It's like the climax is when you really know that what you genuinely feel. And when I spend so much time working on lyrics and so on, you know, I had a dream, crazy dream, anything I wanted to know, any place I needed to go, you know. It's sort of seeing people appreciate what I'm talking about, you know, that when you can take lyrics so many ways, and yet somehow or other I think that people know exactly what point I'm trying to hit.
I think you've just summed up something that I've been looking for the answer to, and I think you hit it, and maybe you knew you hit it, or maybe it just came out. But I think that the reason for your incredible success is probably that very human, very sexual feeling you have towards your music, and you hit people exactly where they live. You've just said it all, and I think you're right that they absolutely know exactly what you mean, and you get your message to them so quickly that that spells the success. Okay, we're good. All right.
Yeah, my desire to advance a quality which I never even knew I possessed until I became a part of Zeppelin is the lyrics, you know, the lyrical content, the weight of what I'm trying to put across, you know. When you asked me what else would I really like, or what would be the ultimate, man's search for that which he knows not. The thing about some people in my position think, I hear people say, well, where else do you go from here, you know? But it depends on, I think that's the most lame statement that I've ever heard, and it does echo through the corridors of success, whether it be musical or whatever, you know, success in business or an expressive success, you know, or artistic success. And I hate to hear people say that, because you can never attain perfection. There's no way that you can do that. And my frustration is to when I said to you earlier that I had become very mellow and very content. It means that I'm probably on the threshold of writing something really beautiful, you know. When I get into this sort of frame of mind, it means that possibly I'm going to become more eloquent, you know, just for a spell. I mean,
maybe some masterpiece is being born right in your brain now.
It could well be, yeah, because I suddenly feel, it's like when I wrote the lyrics to Stairway to Heaven, I was just hot, flushed, and something was pushing the pen, you know. But it came after a period of time like this one there, you know, when I was really at peace with everything, you know. And that's what I want to do. I just want to get better and better and better lyrically, you know. I mean, it started off with, the lyrics to Celebration Day are very hard to pick out, and there's a lot of my words always relate to moving on, to the journey, to the travel, not to the travel as such, but to the road, you know?
The end, to the epitome, to nirvana or the zenith, or wherever you want to call it. Yeah. When you...
Oh, excuse me, New York.
Robert, when you do a tour like this, which is very draining physically and mentally, I mean, how does it affect you? Does it how can you be so mellow as you are today, and you really are? I know it's not a pose, in going out and facing crowds the way you've been doing every night for so many weeks.
Well, that's why I come here, because I enjoy doing it, you know. I mean, I don't need any bread. I live a meagre existence where I live on the Welsh borders in England. I live with gypsy folk who don't have no money, no nothing. Nothing is built around the material.
Serious?
Yeah. Yes.
That's really unusual.
I mean, well, not really. These are the people who turned me on to the folk trip years ago, when I said I used to sit down and play the washboard and blow the harmonica. Well, those people are still around me, and they drive old trucks and collect scrap metal, and they got rings in their ears, and you know,
that's great. Well, I would
neckerchiefs around the neck, and they got no bread, and I got no bread.
Well, you know how we picture you, of course. I mean, Led Zeppelin is the most successful group. We picture you in a house like Gatsby with a white Rolls Royce and servants and, you know, all of that.
I got a 48 Chevy pickup truck, and I bought a 59 Crown Imperial drophead, which is actually, I was a bit naughty there, because I spent thousands and thousands of dollars, 19 coats of candy apple red paint, and a new white electric roof with leopard skin headlining, and it's so phallic. It's so, talk about cock rock. But the topper, you see, is I drive around in my 59 Crown Imperial, and I live miles away from London in the countryside, right, surrounded by all my sort of half Jippo friends. And I'm driving around in this big, sleek, long 59 finned machine. And I jump out, and I ain't shaved for days, and there's mud over my boots, and I'm covered in muck, and a dog jumps out the back seat, and it's like the total opposite to how the people expect me to be over there. And it's really great to see them all sort of recoil with disbelief. But it is that lifestyle that induces me. There's a feeling I get when I look to the west. And that's the direction that I always head from my home, towards Wales and the mountains, and the people who live there, who've gone to live there, to leave behind the materialistic life to a degree, you know. There's a few dope smugglers and but there's a lot of good.
Find that in every crowd.
Yeah, there's a lot of colourful people there, and my existence at home is really surrounded by a total opposite to the white Rolls Royce and the Gatsby.
So then I guess that's why you can tolerate this being deluged and overrun with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people for weeks on end, and really not have it make a total wreck out of you.
Yeah, well, I like to share what I've got.
What's your reaction to the criticism? I don't know how aware you are of it, but I'm sure every artist has to be. But how do you feel when a writer bum raps the group or doesn't have the best review to give you?
Well, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And the unfortunate thing is that it can become cliched occasionally for a guy who's got no musical or is incapable of getting off, because he reckons that he's too highbrow, or he's seen it all, you know. These people are capable of being unable to relate to the majority through the pen exactly what happened, and whether the guy likes it or not. When the critic comes to see us play, we give all, and you can bum rap us all you like, but we give all. And I mean, there's very few bands that give until they collapse, you know. And I mean, this must always be noted, you know. This is noted by the people at the concert, but some of the critics would prefer to make their name by saying, well, I don't really see that much about him, you know. But maybe one day their eyes will open a little bit.
Let's hope so. One more question, Robert. Where do you see yourself 10 years from today?
Lying on this bed with you at the foot of it.
Do you really think that 10 years from today we'll both be doing exactly what we're doing?
I think I'll be doing something very close to what I'm doing now. At least I'll be lying on a bed.
Somewhere. But I mean, can you see yourself professionally still doing, can you see Led Zeppelin still flourishing? Can you see your own creativity and music still moving on?
Oh, the creativity, definitely. Led Zeppelin, well, time will tell all, you know. Time, as as in the Wanton song on Physical Graffiti, which is coming out soon, there's a line that says, "Time the wheel rolls on," and it's just a case of waiting and seeing. But if we can keep developing this prism, this spectrum, this total 360-degree ability of going in any direction at any time and creating something which people aren't ready for, and which we're not even we don't even realize what we're about to do when we get together to develop a new album, and things go one way and they go another. If we can keep turning ourselves on with such variety, which is the spice, right? The element that keeps us all going. I mean, if we can go from Communication Breakdown to tracks like In the Light, which you haven't heard yet, right? If we can keep just crossing from right over these amazing bridges, then there's no reason why we shouldn't keep on going. Maybe the set will get a little bit shorter, and maybe I'll sit down in between numbers,
All right, then we'll make a date to meet you in 1985 in February at the Garden.
Providing 1984 isn't as heavy as has been predicted, yeah.
I'll buy that. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Right, let's see these wild lines, okay. Robert. That was marvelous. God, I could... Robert, thank you so much for letting me come backstage and talk to you. It's been the highlight of the year for me.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you.
Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, and this is Alison Steele, the Night Bird, reminding you that it pays to go to meetings in the Army Reserve.